You know that feeling? The one where it seems like the more we learn about a problem, the harder it is to actually do anything about it? Well, that's the core of this really powerful idea we're going to dig into today. It's called the paralysis of knowing. And honestly, it might just be the key to understanding all the gridlock and chaos we see everywhere.
Okay, so let's start here with this really jarring event. A citizen, a guy named Alex Pretty, is shot and killed by federal agents in Minneapolis. Now, he was armed at a protest, which for a lot of people is a fundamental right, and you'd think the debate would be about that, right? But this whole thing just triggered a massive firestorm, and the fallout, well, it wasn't really about principle. It was about something else, something that pulls back the curtain on a really deep dysfunction in how we're being governed.
So what was that something else? You're not going to believe it. It's television. Yeah, I'm serious. We're living in this bizarre era where major policy decisions aren't hammered out in government halls. Nope, they're basically dictated by morning show soundbites. And the feedback loop between the TV and the policy, it's instant, it's direct, and frankly, it's pretty terrifying when you see it in action.
I mean, just look at how fast this all went down. At 6:15 in the morning, a TV host on Fox and Friends, Brian Kilmeade, just kind of throws out an idea. Says they should send this guy, Tom Homan, to Minneapolis. He says it again at 7:15. Then a third time around 8:10. And then, get this, by 8:31 a.m., the president tweeted out, it's official policy. We're talking less than 2.5 hours from a suggestion on TV to actual government action. That's not just influence. That is a direct pipeline from a TV studio straight to the White House.
But here's the thing. This whole government by morning show stuff, it's just a symptom. It's absurd, yeah, but it points to a much, much deeper problem. And to really get our heads around it, we've got to look past the crazy 24-hour news cycle and go all the way back. Like back to a 17th century play. Stick with me here.
Okay, so what's the real problem here? At its core, it's a fundamental flaw in the way we think. For literally centuries, in pretty much every field you can imagine, we have made the exact same mistake, over and over and over again. And what is that mistake? We consistently, and I mean dramatically, underestimate how complex the world really is.
And history just shows this pattern so clearly. I mean, first we thought the Earth was the only planet. Nope, wrong. Then we figured, okay, well, our solar system must be the only one. Wrong again. Then it was, all right, our galaxy, the Milky Way, that's the entire universe. Wrong. They even called other galaxies spiral nebula because they just couldn't imagine more. It even happened in 1925. A brilliant astronomer, Cecilia Payne, figures out that the sun is mostly hydrogen, game-changing stuff. But her supervisor literally dismissed her discovery because it just didn't fit the simple model everyone thought was true. See the pattern? Our mistake is always, always in the same direction. We assume things are simple little rocks when they're actually these complex, developing eggs.
And that brings us all the way back to that play I mentioned, Hamlet. Now, you probably know the standard take, right? Hamlet's this good guy who just can't make up his mind. He's paralyzed by indecision. But there's this other, way more powerful way to look at it. What if Hamlet isn't paralyzed by indecision? What if he's paralyzed by insight? He just sees too much. He sees all the complexity, all the angles. He knows that no matter what he does, it's going to have unintended consequences, that innocent people will get hurt. He knows that in a world this messy, there's just no such thing as clean hands.
And this, right here, is the central idea for today, the paralysis of knowing. It's when you can't act not because you don't have enough information, but because you have too much. It's when you see every possible angle, when you know for a fact that your good intentions will be twisted, that your actions will be used as a weapon against you, and that the whole system is basically designed to chew you up and spit you out. It is, literally, the paralysis of insight.
All right, so how does this idea, this diagnosis, actually apply to our world right now? Well, once you start looking at things through this lens, this paralysis of knowing, you start seeing it absolutely everywhere, in all these problems that seem totally unrelated at first.
Okay, case in point, look at this headline. In Britain, people are talking about 15-minute cities. It's a pretty simple idea, right? Just making cities more walkable so you can get to a store or a school in about 15 minutes. And somehow, this is being branded as Stalinist. Seriously. So you have this really complex, important debate about community and cars and how we want to live, but this kind of extreme language just kills any real conversation before it even gets off the ground.
And what this really does is reveal this long-running internal battle within conservatism. See, on the one hand, you have this traditional version that really values community, a sense of place, local life. But on the other hand, you've got this hardline, free market version that sees everything as just a transaction. And time again, the transactional side just wins out, and in the process, it hollows out the very communities the other side says it wants to protect.
And this just creates this perfect, vicious cycle. So, step 1, you defund the parts of the government that actually enforce the rules, like trading standards. Step 2, well, now the state can't actually do its job. So what happens? Illegal businesses, like vape shops that are really fronts for money laundering, they just pop up everywhere. And then for the grand finale, the very same people who defunded the state turn around and complain that the state isn't working. It's a total self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's all born from this refusal to deal with how complex things actually are.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about cars for a second. $19.5 billion. What is that number? Well, that's the absolutely massive financial hit Ford is taking right now. Why? Because it, along with other big American automakers, is backing away from electric vehicles. They're basically choosing the simple, short-term profits from gas guzzlers over the much more complex and, yeah, uncertain electric future.
Now, this kind of retreat creates a huge risk. There's actually a name for it, Galapagos syndrome. You know how the animals on the Galapagos Islands evolved in isolation? Well, that's the danger here. If the U.S. auto industry sticks with gas while the rest of the world goes electric, it could find itself totally isolated, completely orphaned with obsolete technology. It's another failure to act, a retreat into a simple, short-term view when the real world is going through this massive, complex global change.
And you see this same paralysis so clearly in medicine, too. Get this, we have hundreds of drugs that are totally safe, their patents have expired, and they could potentially treat all sorts of new conditions. The obvious, no-brainer solution would be for the government to fund trials to test them. But it doesn't happen. And why not? Simple. No patent means no big profits for a drug company. The incentives of the system are just completely broken. We can see the problem, we can see the solution right in front of our faces, but we're just paralyzed by the complexity of the system.
So you're probably thinking, is there any way out of this? I mean, if knowing too much makes us do nothing, then what's the alternative? Well, for this final part, let's look at what it takes to make that really difficult choice, the choice to act, even when you know it's going to get messy. And for a little bit of hope, let's go back to where we started, Minneapolis. The indigenous community there is organizing. They're bringing together dozens of different ethnic and spiritual groups. And look, they know the odds are stacked against them. They see all the complexity. They know how their actions can be twisted and misinterpreted, but they are choosing to act anyway. They're actually finding a way to push through that paralysis. And really, it comes down to a choice between two different kinds of hell. First, there's Hamlet's hell. That's the clean, sterile prison of just thinking and never doing. It's retreating from the world because you don't want to be vulnerable. Or there's the alternative, and that is messy, imperfect, vulnerable action. It means accepting that you're going to make mistakes, that your hands are going to get dirty, but choosing to jump in and engage with the world anyway. And in a way, that's a form of love. Because here's the final and kind of stark truth of it all. The choice we have isn't between taking a perfect, clean action and taking a messy one. That's not the real choice. The real alternative to imperfect action isn't purity. It's doing nothing at all. And doing nothing? That's just being complicit. So that leaves us with this one big question to chew on. Can you accept that we can't just think our way to safety, that there's no perfectly rational, perfectly safe path? Can we move past this paralysis of knowing everything that could possibly go wrong and choose instead to act, as imperfect as it might be, out of something that looks a whole lot like love?